Well, hello, Greater MSP region. It is my pleasure to be with General Mills CEO Jeff Harmening today. General Mills, as you know, is one of the anchors of our region's headquarters economy and of our globally significant food and agriculture sector. General Mills is also one of the founders of the Greater MSP Partnership and a powerful source of leadership across many areas of Greater MSP's work. Thanks so much, Jeff, for taking a few minutes to share your thoughts with the region.
Well, thanks for having me, Peter. It's good to talk to you.
Let's first just talk about General Mills, get a little context. You're in all of our kitchen cupboards, but we may not all be fully aware of the company's scale and operations. Tell us about the company's growth and presence across the world and the role you play in the food and agriculture industry.
Well, for Americans, I mean, General Mills is in more than 95% of U.S. households. And so people know us in the United States as Betty Crocker and Pillsbury and Cheerios and Blue Buffalo and brands like that. But we have operations in more than 100 countries throughout the world and big operations in China and Brazil, as well as many parts of Europe. And so we have a workforce of about 35,000 employees around the world, half inside the United States and half abroad. And so while many of you watching may consider General Mills to be a Minnesota company, it's certainly headquartered in Minnesota, but it really is a global food and agriculture company. And that's one of the reasons why we think we have a responsibility not only to the people we serve in terms of making food, but also a responsibility to the planet and maintaining good soil health and water and presence in the community.
Well, it's to your point about being all around the world and in Asia, it means that you would have seen this crisis early and been tracking it across your system. How soon did you see this in General Mills, maybe in China or Asia? And then how did you watch it progress across the globe?
Well, I mean, look, there are pros and cons of seeing it march across the globe, but for us, we saw this impact our business in China starting at the end of January, and by the end of February, we had an internal task team set up to deal with the coronavirus as we knew it was spread around the world. And at first we saw it in China, and then in Europe, and then here in the U.S. But I suppose the silver lining in that is, having seen it in China first, we put protocols in place and priorities in place that have helped us, I think, better deal with the virus as it has spread to other nations. In particular, we set up a framework for prioritizing the safety of our employees first, followed by food safety, because, right now we're making food the world needs. Usually we talk about making food the world loves, but really now it's making food the world needs. And then finally, making sure we give back to our community in the process, which is why we, make donations to things like Feeding America here locally, Second Harvest, Heartland, or in China, giving Haagen-Dazs ice cream to healthcare workers on the front line. And so, as we have seen it, I think it has helped us, sharpen our priorities, which I just mentioned to you, which has helped us here in the U.S., certainly and locally in Minnesota.
Well, give us a sense of what the crisis, we're kind of 4 or 5 weeks into it now, has meant to the business in terms of operations. I mean, how have you had to adapt to maintain and maybe scale up? And, what does that demand look like?
Well, I think it's had a couple big effects. One is on overall demand and where it comes from, and the second is how we work. Talk both of those. In terms of overall demand, we've seen big swings, and so and about 85% of our business is food consumed at home, and that business, because the restaurants are closed, that business has really taken off. But we have 15% of our business, which are Haagen-Dazs shops in China, or serving the restaurant business here in the U.S. And, that business is obviously way down. And so even within General Mills, we have some businesses that are having trouble keeping up with demand, and other businesses that have customers who are struggling to survive. And so we've seen all ends of the economic spectrum as we serve, the world needs right now. But overall, we have seen, our strong brands grow, especially baking brands. People are baking at home more than ever. We've seen people looking for recipes on things like BettyCrocker.com, BillBread.com kind of skyrocketed. And so we know that people are looking to General Mills and companies like ours for tips on how to use the things that they've suddenly stocked up in their pantries, as well as seeing the devastation on places like the restaurant industry. Actually, what's interesting for me though has been maybe more importantly, is how we're working right now,
Mm,
and how that's changed. You know, we put in a lot of extra measures at our manufacturing sites, and so aimed at keeping people at home who are sick and making sure we've had medical leave for those sick, also rewarding people who those are coming front lines every day, and for us that's our manufacturing employees. We were one of the first companies in the world to mandate that people work from home if they could.
mm,
And I remember the exact date. It was March 13th. We announced that all employees, General Mills employees who were working, anyone who could work from home needed to work from home on March 13th. And so we've taken great care on that. One of the things we've learned throughout this whole process, I think we're more agile than we ever have been
mm,
before, because we're prioritizing only those things that are most important, and the rest of the stuff we're just not doing.
mm,
And what's been amazing is to see the unlocking creativity of General Mills employees. And one of my big lessons is that I think maybe sometimes we overmanage the people who are working for us. If we give them the right parameters and the right priorities, and let them do their job, I mean, we have a lot of really skilled people. And what we're finding now is that we're moving faster, and I
mm.
think better than we ever have before.
Well, that's a lesson that we can take.
Yeah.
And you were definitely on the front end. I mean, March 13th, it wasn't that long ago. It seems like a long time ago. But I remember we were sitting in our office commenting on when you made that decision. That had a bit of a splash, and I think woke a lot of people up in this region about the seriousness of it. I wonder if that relatively early action had something to do with the fact that you had some visibility to what this looked like in other parts of the world.
I'm almost certain that's the case. You know, we had an experience in China already, and so you had seen what the virus could do and how serious it was. Even if they're in the media here in the U.S., it was being played down as kind of maybe just another flu. I mean, we knew it was a lot more than that because we had seen it before, and we knew the preparations that we had to put in place. So I think it did give us a leg up. I also say we acted decisively.
Hmm.
We came into a conference room. I remember the night after the president spoke on March 11th, and we came into our office on that following morning, our leadership team, and we made the decision that we're going to close all of our offices and we would not work from home if we could on the following Monday. And about 2 hours later, we actually had a protocol like to do things globally. We were really fast. It was really interesting to watch. And one of the reasons we didn't make the announcement that day, we waited until the following morning. I felt like if we made the announcement on a Thursday, people wouldn't come in Friday, and that would actually create a lot of lack of safety because they might have to come back in the office later on to get their things. We thought it'd be better if people had a little time to plan.
Wonder if that's actually some value to Minnesota about having that global connectivity, and some global intelligence there.
Yeah, I think Minnesota, we really benefit by having such a good group of corporate headquarters here in the states, in the state, and whether that's companies like General Mills or Ecolab or 3M or Cargill, or you can go on and on. I mean, I think the fact that we have so many companies with a global footprint and so many different sectors, we can learn from each other. I think what's also been interesting to watch. I guess you didn't ask this, but what's interesting to watch throughout this pandemic is the way that the state government here in Minnesota has worked with the business community. And I think it's been a real strength. And although, the economy is tough and no one's particularly enjoying the current pandemic, I would say that the state of Minnesota has dealt with it at least as effectively as anywhere else I've seen. I think that's because there's such a productive relationship, which doesn't mean everybody always agrees, but there's a productive relationship between the government, the educational system, the business community, and the community itself, which I think bodes well for how we're going to bring ourselves out of this.
Well, that public-private partnership, I mean, that's our tradition and our habit. So maybe it's serving us well in this moment. I mean, so in this time of crisis, many of us are going back to basics, and we're thinking about family, we're thinking about health, and we're thinking about food. And the security of our food supply is something that is top of mind suddenly. We used to take it for granted. It's also increasingly in the headlines. And what's General Mills' assessment of food supply and the security of the U.S. food system at this moment?
Well, I would say that for us, we've been able to service our retail customers and our consumer demand really well throughout the pandemic. Not always perfectly, because you can't always find the size of Cheerios you want on the shelf, the right flavor of Progresso that you're used to, but you probably can find cereal and you can probably find one flavor of Progresso. And so what I would say is that our food system has held up remarkably well in the short term, despite reports you get on certain, particularly meat factories having to close down and spread of coronavirus. I think our food supply has held up well. But you know what I will also tell you at the same time, I mean, I just think it goes to the fragility of our whole system. And, one of the things General Mills we're really proud of is how we take care of the earth, and whether it's soil health or water health and a commitment to regenerative agriculture. One of the things that I think this shares is the interconnectivity among people, and then people with the planet. And so, hopefully one lesson learned from this crisis will be how everything is so interconnected, and that, that includes our food supply, and that we need to be aware of not only where things come from, but also the earth and how we take care of it.
Well, maybe along those lines, to the point that the food system is interconnected, maybe it's more fragile than we thought. We need to make it more resilient in the face of shocks like pandemics and other major longer-term challenges that we know are coming, like climate change. I mean, what are some no-regret steps we should be taking now in that direction?
Well, I mean, I think in times of great change like this, you see the best innovation happening. I mean, I don't think it's an accident that Wheaties was born during the Great Depression, and that Cheerios during the First World War, or Hamburger Helper in the early '70s when there was an oil crisis. I mean, I think all of these things happened because there was great change, and so I think it's the same thing with the climate. Now that we see the challenges that climate change can bring, we also see during this pandemic all of the positive outcomes, at least in the short term, on climate, and things like pollution and wildlife and things like that, which tells you that things can be repaired if we just take care of them. For General Mills, our priorities really are around soil health, because we grow so many grains. And what we have found is that to the extent we take care of the soil, it helps reduce carbon emissions, it helps reduce greenhouse gases, it improves water quality, and it improves the amount of water that runs off of fields, which is to say the soil absorbs more, it's more nutrient dense. And so one of the things we have really focused on is soil health, and in particular regenerative agriculture, because one of the things we know is that as the climate changes, companies like General Mills want to win, but we also know there needs to be a win in it for farmers, and there needs to be a win in it for humanity all at the same time. You can't just pick one winner and everybody else lose. So for us, and last year we made the pledge to create 1 million square acres of regenerative agriculture by 2030, and that's taken a whole host of people to do it. But the reason we're doing it is so important is that we believe that by taking on this challenge, that we can make the soil healthier, we can increase the profitability of farmers, which we desperately need, and we can improve the environment all at the same time.
So it sounds to me like your calculation in this moment is not that we need to be trading off short-term needs against long-term aims, but in fact, you see a relationship between those things. And if anything, we need to be, deepening our commitment or accelerating our commitments to some of those long-term goals.
Yeah, there really can't be that kind of trade-off. I think that's a false choice. What you see are the people who truly innovate are the ones who take what's in front of them and do something with it, which is what General Mills is attempting to do. And so we need to deal with the pandemic that's right in front of us, but we can't only deal with that.
Yeah.
We need to be able to deal with that as well as look down the road on some of the greater issues and do those things at the same time. That's what great companies do, and that's what big countries do, and that's what great regions do. And I think Minnesota is one of those.
Well, this has something to do with leadership. This seems like a leadership moment and not a management moment. You've seen a lot of things in your career, but probably nothing quite like this. How are you evolving as a leader? Or how are you rethinking what leadership means in a moment like this? You touched on a little bit of it before.
Well, this is an environment, that's not unprecedented in world history. I mean, there was a pandemic in 1918 and 1920, and General Mills actually was around, and many of the things we're putting in place right now are things that we did in 1918 to 1920. One of the leadership lessons for me is that this is not unprecedented in human events. We haven't seen anything like this, and we're all dealing with something new. And the important thing for leaders like me is to not have all the answers, because it's not really possible to have all the answers when you haven't seen something before. And those companies and those people, I think, who are going to come out stronger at the end are those who can learn throughout the process. And so it really is having a learning mindset, and knowing that you're going to make some mistakes. And that when you do, the question is not are you going to make mistakes, but how fast are you going to recover from the ones that you make. And in the process, setting priorities for the things that are the most important, and doing those things and leaving everything else behind. And that's one of the things I've seen about General Mills. We've been faster over the last 6 weeks in how we act than I think I've ever seen us in my 25 years. And we're all working remotely. So it's not because we're sitting next to each other and have proximity. I think it's because we're all focused on what the most important priorities are, and we're executing against those. And if something's not important, we're not on it. And I think that's also a leadership lesson, is if you get people and you give them the priorities and you give them the general direction, let them go do the job. And I find at least more often than not, they line with answers that are probably better than you would have come up with on your own.
Well, what's true of a company may to some extent be true of the region as well. We're committed, the MSP partnership, at driving from crisis to recovery and then coming out of this stronger than we went into it. So as a corporate leader in this community, what do you think we need to be doing right now and in the coming months to put us on track to be better than we went into this?
Well, I would give the people watching this a little bit of hope. I think that the most important thing is collaboration among different sectors and among in the economy. And it's interesting because MSP was founded in 2008, as you know, and my predecessor, Ken Powell, was the chair of that committee. And MSP was founded to bring the Minnesota region out of the Great Recession in a better place than it started. And so I am thankful for MSP and really appreciative of the efforts that you all undertake. It's very clear to me that what's going to get us out of the pandemic in a way that is stronger than before is going to be the government, business leaders, community, and associations like MSP all working together starting right now to look down the road at what might be. Knowing that the government can't solve problems through stimulus checks and policy by themselves. Business leaders can't solve it through hiring and firing and employment all by themselves. And associations, it has to be together. The best things get done when different parts of the economy, different people, different perspectives come together. And so for me, the key to our getting out of this recession is not going to be a specific framework. It's not going to be a particular action. It's not going to be government talking about how terrible business is, or business talking about how inept government is. It's going to have everybody rolling up our sleeves together saying, okay, what do we need to do in order to start planning for the future? And there's a lot of discussion now about health policy versus economics. I mean, that's a false choice. We need to do both. We need to get our population healthy. We need to deal with a pandemic, and we need to get people back to work. And I think our governor is doing a great job doing that. But also, I think he's doing a great job. He's not doing it by himself. He's relying on health policy experts. He has talked to a lot of leaders in the business community. And so I think that for us is kind of realizing that we truly are in together. It's more than a slogan. And it has to be the way we work. And one of the things I am most encouraged about Minnesota is that that's kind of the way we were before the pandemic. And I thought what I have seen has only heightened that sense of it. Now, is it going to be easy? No economic recovery is going to be easy. This recession is going to be deep, and it could be long, but we will pull through it because we have, and it's going to take the effort of everybody rowing in about the same direction in order to get us there.
Well, I think, coming from a company that has seen pandemics before, I think that sense of hope is informed and well received and really appreciated. Thanks to you for everything you're doing, not only in the company, but in this region and across the world. And thanks again for taking a few minutes today. I know we'll be working together in the months ahead.
Thank you for your leadership, Peter, and appreciate everybody listening.
All right.